So it's a big day in this conversation about immigration and whether we're getting it right here in the UK. The Home Secretary has admitted that the government has failed to control our borders. This comes as the Home Office are publishing the country's immigration statistics this morning. They show, and this has literally just broken in the last 30 seconds, that the UK has its highest net migration since the Second World War. An estimated 504,000 more people came to the UK than left last year, and more than 40,000 people have crossed the Channel in dangerous small boats also this year. Speaking to Isabel and Andrew Pearce on Breakfast this morning, Levelling Up Secretary Michael Gove jumped to the defence of the Home Secretary.
Suella in the House of Commons and also in the committee yesterday was clear that there are challenges which we need to address in our asylum system. And Suella, in her time in office, has made sure that the Manston Processing Centre is up and running now effectively after, again, there were challenges there because of the number of people who were coming over. We've also secured an arrangement with the French government, Suella and her opposite number in France, to better police the Channel, but there is more to be done in order to deal with the criminal gangs who are trading in human misery.
So joining me in the studio now to discuss this is Henry Bolton, border control expert, and Ivan Sampson, immigration lawyer. We've been sitting here, fellas, waiting for these figures to come out whilst the news broadcast was going on. Any surprises in there, Henry?
No surprise that it's gone up. Surprised at the extent to which it's gone up, most certainly. And of course, the difficulty here is not only political, it's practical. We've got local government at the moment across the country, as was seen in the House of Commons when Robert Jenrick was talking about answering urgent questions on accommodation. You know, you've got MPs from across the country, and it's sort of beyond one party here. Saying, look, what is happening here? Our local areas are being now flooded with people. Our hotels are being taken over. We have no idea how long this is going to go on, and no idea what you're going to do about it. There is no plan, and that's the problem. And people say that a lot of, we've got all sorts of different groups within that figure of 504,000, of course. But, you know, let's be generous and say they pay their taxes. That's all well and good. But those taxes don't translate into increased services on the ground. We're seeing cuts in policing, effectively. We're seeing cuts at local government level. So the idea that, well, they contribute anyway, so it balances out, is not correct, because what we're seeing is additional strain in local communities, not an increase in the services to match.
Ivan, let me ask you, how do you think, I know it's a bit mean of me to ask you this when we've only just heard it, but how do you think this 500,000 will break down? How many of those will be students, for instance, studying here, people coming over just to join family members? How many will be, outside of Europe? How many will be inside of Europe? Can you put any kind of detail on these figures at the moment?
Of course. We roughly issue about 1 million visas a year. Now, the bulk of those will be people coming to work here under the skilled worker visa route and students. And there's been an increase of some 71% of those two categories since the pandemic. But that's a reflection on the shortage of labour in the UK. We need people to fill the jobs. We're not doing that with the resident labour market. And so employers are having to a much wider search. And then also the impact of Brexit, because those people that had free movement now require skilled worker visas. So that increase, a bulk of that for skilled workers is EU nationals who now need a visa.
But isn't it ironic, though, Henry, that I think a lot of people who voted for Brexit thought that we might see our net migration go down, and we've just had the highest figures since Second World War.
Indeed.
How has that happened?
Well, you know, I said, even before the referendum, the risk of Brexit was not in leaving the European Union, it was having a government and a civil service that was too incompetent to be able to manage the process effectively. Now, Brexit, there is no ifs and buts about this. Brexit gave us a huge degree of independence in law, government and public administration, so that our government, our people in Westminster, could make decisions in the best interests of the UK in relation to borders, fisheries, trade, you name it. What we've seen is a total failure of vision, leadership and planning to be able to exploit that new freedom that our parliamentarians have
what
got
are the barriers
to deliver.
to that? Is that literally just human incompetence, or is there a reason why politicians aren't clamping down on this as hard as what I think the public would like?
Well, I think it is largely... incompetence is slightly unfair, but... and this isn't a great analogy, but it illustrates the point. We've got a Prime Minister who spent 7 years in the House of Commons and never had any training to do the job. If you had a general that you were going to appoint to command an army on operations, you would not expect him to do very well if he'd only been in the army for 7 years and had never done any training. And as I say, that's not a perfect analogy, but throughout the system, from ministers through junior ministers, through civil servants and through our parliamentarians, all the way down to the people who are assessing asylum claims, the training and the preparation for what they're doing is simply inadequate. And we don't select candidates for Parliament on the basis of their leadership traits or their ability to see the big picture and to be able to sort of plan and run a big, multifaceted department like the Home Office.
Well, look, Suella Braverman has this department now. She had this Home Affairs Select Committee meeting yesterday, Ivan. Were you impressed by what she had to say? Do you think she's the right person for this job?
No, she isn't. She hasn't got a grasp of the law. She doesn't understand the Refugee Convention, or she's not talking to the advisors to get a grip of it. She was asked about a young boy from Africa who wishes to come here to claim asylum. She couldn't answer that question. And her aide, one of her aides came to her rescue and said, well, you can apply through UNCHR. That's all well and good. Even if you're recognised as a refugee by the UNCHR, that doesn't mean that you can come here. So how do people come here? The only way they can come here is it's not actually illegal entry. Coming as an asylum seeker is not illegal. All it means is you're entering the UK without permission. Perfectly lawful under the convention. It's not illegal and it's not criminal.
So do you think the language that we use is wrong? Should we not be calling people illegal immigrants?
Absolutely, yeah. I mean,
what would you prefer? Because I think it is really important, actually, in this immigration discussion to differentiate between refugees, asylum seekers, illegal immigrants, and those people who are coming here, welcome, with visas, paying tax, registered on the system. We know who they are. We know what they're doing. What language would you like us to use? Alex?
Well, they're asylum applicants. But this is the thing. The figure you gave of 500,000, of those, only 69,000 were asylum applications. And of those, only 15,000 have actually had a decision. That's some 24% down since pre-pandemic. Also, that's 50% less than the number we were taking in the late 90s and early 2000s. So, in actual fact, we have less asylum applications now than we did 20 years ago.
Is it? Go on then.
I think, in a way, we're looking at this in the wrong frame. Now, I've helped 14 countries to reorganise, root and branch their borders to deal with certain challenges of a similar scale for those countries as we're facing here now. And, when you do that, you don't approach the problem from this is the situation that we have to live with. If the legislation is not allowing the politicians to act in the way that the politicians and the nation believe to be in their best interests, then you have to address the legislation. But you can't address the legislation if you don't know what you're trying to achieve. And so you have to go back to that sort of strategic national analysis where you get very clear political intent. This is what we want. And you've got to break that down to an extent because of the different groups and different types of migration. But then you make sure that you've got the structures and the legislation, the powers to act. And at the moment, we've not got that. What we've got is we've got ministers, the Prime Minister down, who are saying, show me something that I can present as a 10-point plan or a 5-point plan. This is a highly complex thing, and sorry, Minister, you need to have a proper planning team. And I'll tell you what I would do with... I think Suella Braverman is the right person. She's forward-leaning, she wants to get things done, but she's not got the support and the advice around her that she needs. What I would say to her is, and she knows who to speak to make this happen, I know she does, get some joint operations planners in from Northwood, make it very clear what your political intent is here, and let them work out the options that you've got. Take that deep breath, do it, and make time for it to happen,
Even
because
if that's
otherwise
unpopular
we're just...
with the electorate. Because,
Sorry?
of course, even if those decisions are unpopular with the electorate...
Well, unless you go through that strategic analysis and planning, you don't really know what your options are and what the implications are. None of that has happened. I know none of that has happened. And otherwise, what we're going to have is, as Ira quite rightly says, we need to look at the UN Convention on Refugees. Absolutely we do. It's old. I don't think it's fit for purpose. We need to readdress that, and we need to do that through the UNHCR.
Yeah.
But what we're going to end up with is we're going to end up with lots of little individual actions and responses, none of which deliver
is there any of that
the
you
overall
agree
result.
with? Or do you see it very differently as an immigration law?
Not at all. I think we need to relook at the convention. This is a problem for the government. If we have safe legal routes to come to the UK, the end result is that net asylum, number of asylum seekers will probably double or triple. You see, and that's the problem for the government. So if they set up these safe legal routes, people will use them. What we can't have is asylum seekers deciding which country they want to go to.
Yeah.
So we need to come out the convention. There's two things. We need to have asylum seekers seeking asylum in the first safe country. And two, we need to know who they are. At the moment, if you come across the channel, most of them have no identity documents. Can you imagine coming to the airport without a passport? Would you be let into the country? And there seems to be two different systems. So if you come across the channel, you can enter the country with no documentation, but at the airport you can't. It's a risk to the security of the country. So we need to know who they are. And so we need to relook at the convention. My view is, and I've been told off by many of my colleagues, because I'm a human rights lawyer, that the convention should be kept. My belief is we come out of the convention, have our own rules, which apply to today's problems.
Yeah, well, gentlemen, it's so nice to have this conversation with time to discuss it. I think Suella Braverman needs to get both of you in her office, frankly. I'm sure you could sort it out.
I'm up for that.
In a moment. There you go. Henry Bolton and Ivan Stanson, thank you.